Cost segregation. I don't know about you, but I keep hearing these words and I know they're important, but they sound like big words to me and I have no idea what they actually mean. So here's a video for it. And to help me with this, I don't know if you guys saw a previous video that I did about 1031 exchanges, where I met with Scott Saunders, who you see there with me. I'm going to link to that video below. If you've ever wanted to know or understand better about 1031 exchanges, definitely check out that video. What I loved so much about that video and what I'm hoping that we do today is, I knew at the time 1031 exchanges conceptually what they meant, but I didn't know enough to really have a practical application. Like, okay, let's actually like apply this to my life. And that's how I feel now about cost segregation studies. And I'm so excited that Scott is back here with me, because I thought that he did such a good job about really bringing the 1031 exchange conversation into a dummies level understanding for those of us who maybe aren't as big on big words. And we want that, like, okay, let's talk human to human. What does this actually mean versus what the textbooks say? So I'm excited, Scott, to have you back. I know you have been on this cost segregation bandwagon. I don't even want to call it a bandwagon because that makes it sound negative, but you've been doing this cost segregation thing. You're a huge proponent of it. And we're going to talk today about what in the world this buzz phrase is for people. Before we do you want to tell us just a little bit about yourself? And the specific thing that gets me most excited about you, that I want people to know, is that you're not just some dude sitting behind a desk preaching a product. You're an actual investor, a big time investor, and you are doing the cost segregation studies on your properties. So you're not just pitching a product here, you're actually, as an investor, using these, and you can speak from that perspective. So tell us a little bit about you. Who are you? What kind of investor are you? And we'll dive right on it.
Sounds great. Allie, it's great to be with you today.
Hey, I love having
I
you on here.
it's always fun, and I always like how I love your approach of wanting to simplify it, make this usable. So I'm with a company called Asset Preservation Inc. We're based up in Northern California, and I do 1031 exchanges professionally. As you mentioned, I'm also a real estate investor. I like single family homes and duplexes. So I have been doing that for many years. And so professionally, I do 1031 exchanges. Personally, I invest and I take advantage of everything in the code. So I do my own 1031s. Last year, I did 29 cost segregation studies.
That's
So
so
I use
cool.
it.
You're literally selling a product. You're hardcore doing this.
Well, it's such a great tool. And, you made a great comment there about all these big words. There are some great tax strategies in the code. And if people understand what they are conceptually, then you can take advantage of them and profit, right? Increase your return, make more money, and be a more successful investor. And so don't get overwhelmed by all the fancy words and code sections and blah, blah, blah.
No,
We're going to try and simplify it today, talk about some basic conceptual concepts, and then hopefully share how it's a tool that you might want to look at if you've got assets. It might be a tool you can use.
That's awesome. Well, thank you again for being here. I'm so excited because I know that there's a lot about cost segregation that I don't understand. I'm just learning literally with everybody else. So I'm excited to learn it for myself. I think it's something I can take advantage of this year. And like you said it, it's about the tax code. One of the biggest benefits about rental property owning or real estate investing in general is the tax benefit. So how can we maximize what's available to us? And I feel like the cost segregation stuff really nails that out, because it's like pulling out these intricacies of like, oh yeah, there's more we can get. So with that, people are probably like, okay, keep yammering on, but like, hello, what is it? So what is cost segregation? What is a cost segregation study? What's the basic of this?
Sure. A cost segregation study is kind of the mouthful term. Sometimes you'll hear it called a cost seg, which is the abbreviated version. So what it is this: you buy a property, a piece of real estate, and you can depreciate it. So let's just step back before we go into cost seg. Let's just kind of talk about a basic concept, which is depreciation. When you buy a property, the IRS says there's wear and tear. It's going to break down over time. And so there are some arbitrary timelines in place. So if you buy a single family rental, you can depreciate it, which means take a portion of the value of it every year for 27 and a half years and write it off against your rental income. If you have a commercial property, it's 39 years because commercial properties are typically built a little bit more robustly, right? They're going to have thicker windows and heavier duty construction than maybe a residential house. So you've got a property that the tax code says over 27 and a half years, you take the value of the property minus the land, and every year you get that tax benefit. So right there, that's a huge benefit, as you know, Ally, of owning real estate.
If
So
not
let's
one of the biggest, really, because it's a freebie, right? And one of my favorite things that I learned when I first started investing is that real property is the only thing, at least that I know of, that both appreciates and depreciates at the same time, and use the investor or the investment property owner get to profit from both of those. You know, we all know how appreciation profits, but when you're writing off the depreciation, because the IRS is saying, hey, we acknowledge that everything about your house is going to wear out over time, so we're going to let you write off that expense. It's called a phantom expense, because it's not like, you know, if I pay my insurance cost, that's an obvious cost or an obvious expense that I'm writing off. The depreciation is a phantom expense where you don't actually see it in your bank account. So it's kind of like free money, sort of. But you know, it's one of my favorite things. And what I want to clarify for people as we start getting into the cost segregation version of this is depreciation, as we know it, at 27 and a half years, is about the whole property. So it's not about the different parts of the property, it's about the roof, the doors, the walls, everything that's involved in a property is a one like whole project, whole property. So with that in mind, and understanding the depreciation is coming in as a write-off, it's all set at 27 and a half years. What is the cost segregation version of this? Because it's kind of, in my mind, like an advanced depreciation, if you will.
It is. So you said it's the whole property. So we call that straight line depreciation. You get 27, take the value, and just every year you get it by divided by 27 and a half, you get the benefit. So here's what cost segregation is. Now we look at that property and we break out the components of it that we actually have, that we depreciate faster. So instead of looking at the whole piece of real estate, we go in and we break out the different components that are now going to wear out faster. So I can give you a few examples. The garbage disposal, the dishwasher, all your window coverings, the carpet, the landscaping, the wood deck, ceiling fans. So there's a whole big laundry list of things that are part of a house, right? Part of a property, but now we depreciate them on a shorter life cycle. So instead of doing it over 27 and a half years, we get more up front. So I like to kind of call it front loading your depreciation. You're not getting more depreciation, you're just getting the benefit of it now and a little less in the future, right?
So you're almost like skewing it. So as a whole, if I hear you right, you're getting the same amount of depreciation over the total amount of time, but you're getting more of it faster, quicker.
That's a great way to do it. So if you know the time value of money, which we could maybe go down that rabbit trail in a moment, right? Just in normal times, $1 today is worth more than $1 27 years from now.
I was just about to say, this sounds like an inflation conversation, because my question was going to be like, okay, well, if I'm not hard pressed for cash right now, why do I care about getting more quicker? And I think you're diving into it right now. And like, what is this? It's 2022 right now. What is this year known for?
Yeah.
Inflation. So how does that impact exactly where I totally cut you off? But
no, that's
out quickly, because I feel like when people hear inflation, they're like, what? Tell me more.
Well,
and that's where you're going with this.
Yeah, so inflation hits all of us, right? At the grocery store, the gas tank. However, for real estate investors, we've got actually a little bit of a benefit with inflation, right? So when I look at a building and now I break out some of the components, so I depreciated earlier, me getting the benefit of depreciation today in 2022 is worth more to me, right? $1 is worth a lot more today with inflation. So real estate actually benefits, and you know there are a whole bunch of other ways real estate benefits from inflation, whether it's rent increases and bigger appreciation and all these
loans. I love fixed rate loans.
So yeah, so real estate benefits in a way, and you as an investor can benefit and get a better return. So if I get more depreciation in 2022, I'm actually ahead because it's got more more benefit to me today, and in light of inflation, a whole lot more benefit. So that's why you probably
to that too. Not saying that you would only get $100 out of doing a cost segregation thing, but let's say if you got $100 today in your pocket versus $100 in your pocket 5 years from now, you're still going to get that $100 in 5 years, but that $100 isn't going to be worth $100 anymore. Whereas today it's worth $100. In 5 years, it may be worth who knows what, but less than $100. So I think Scott's point is, what he's trying to say is like, you're going to get the same dollar amount regardless of which year you do it. But the sooner you get that dollar amount, the more value each of those dollars holds. Did I say that all correctly?
You said it really well. The value to you in real terms is more. So you mentioned a 5-year time span. Imagine how much less a dollar's worth in 25 years.
30, 40 years.
Yeah, so there's actually, I think,
dollars by then.
yeah, who knows what we'll have, digital something for sure. But the dollar, just a little sidebar, today the dollar, if you look at what a dollar is worth, let's say in the 20s, it's only worth about, in terms of purchasing power, about 3 to 4 cents today.
That's
the full dollar. So that's in that period of time. And we've had, during that time, we had a few areas where inflation was up, but relatively modest. So that's how the purchasing power goes down. And that's why doing a cost segregation study really provides a great increase on your return on investment. So it's like rocket fuel for real estate.
And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the year 2022, the year we're in right now, there's an extra motivation as to why you want to do this with 100% bonus depreciation right now. Can you talk to that a little bit?
Yeah, I can. And so don't get wrapped around it.
Yeah, I
don't get into technicals, but bonus depreciation is something that came out with tax reform back in 2018. And it said all of those things that we break out over shorter depreciation schedules, we can take 100% of that depreciation in 2022, all of it. So it's a massive benefit. Now that benefit is here, it's been here for a few years. It's here for all of 2022. Then next year, you get basically 80% of that in the following year. So it's going to scale down by 20% for the next few years. So this is one of the best years to take advantage of doing a cost segregation study. And by the way, just to simplify it, you can do a cost segregation study after the fact, right? So you can, if you bought a property this year, you can actually do the study next year. So that's not a big deal at all. You're not missing out.
Yeah, that's super good to know. So can you give us an example? Because I feel like we've done a really good job of getting rid of the big words. Like, I know I'm understanding this a little bit more on a practical level, but can you give us an example of like, okay, now we understand how all this works, but like, what does that put in my pocket? Like in terms of dollars, or like, do you have a property example that we can kind of go through of like, what's the difference between doing a cost segregation study and not doing one? Just to help give people a perspective, like, are we talking a $5 extra in my pocket, $5,000 in my pocket? Like, what are we working with here?
Yeah, let me do this. I'm going to give an example of an asset that I bought last year. It's a duplex I bought down in Arkansas. I paid $141,000 for a turnkey duplex. So let me share the numbers. So I paid $141,000 for it. 80% of the value is eligible for depreciation, so about $113,000. If I did just normal, what's called straight line depreciation over 27 and a half years, I get about $4,000 in depreciation every year.
And
so that's
for people, that $4,000, when you say you get $4,000 in depreciation, that is a $4,000 write-off on your taxes. And
exactly
then that equates to as far as money in your pocket, that's a different story. But just to clarify, it's not $4,000 in your pocket, but now if you think of like your active income, you now get to lower it by an extra $4,000, which makes your tax base less.
Exactly. I get offset the rental income by that 4,000. So in a normal environment, 4,000 write-off for me. Now here's what a cost segregation study does. So I did a cost segregation study on that particular property. I got $36,000 in cost segregation benefits.
People are like, where can I sign up?
So I mean, and I'm simplifying. I'm just rounding off the numbers, but I went from 4,000 to 36,000. So to me, an additional write-off, an additional $32,000 in write-off on one property. And that's a duplex, but $141,000 property, you know, a lot of people are buying single family homes at that same price point that are turnkey properties. So that shows you kind of the power of cost segregation. Can you imagine
Yeah.
you scale that? You had a few of those. What it does, it really gives a real estate investor a way to kind of supercharge your returns, get a lot bigger benefit right now. And that's what do you do with that? With that savings, you get a tax savings, take that money, go out and buy more real estate and just
This
bump it
may
up.
be this may be a hard question to answer, and I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. If we're thinking of a $4,000 write-off versus a $36,000 write-off, and obviously this answer is going to be different for everyone because we're all at different tax rates and all that kind of stuff. Can you give a generic number of what that equates to if you reduce? Again, I don't even know if this is answerable because of how many different scenarios, but just a ballpark of like if a $4,000 write-off versus a $36,000 write-off. What can that do for you income wise in terms of how much money you get to literally keep in your pocket each year?
If I were just to generalize it, let's just figure maybe 30% benefit, right? Just a rough one. And I'm just going to use the general one. So 32,000, maybe 10,000 in my pocket. If you did a normal one, maybe you're talking maybe $1,200. So probably ahead.
So we're
Plus
talking like
nine.
a 10 grand difference in your pocket.
Exactly.
That's
Now,
huge.
a caveat there, Allie. You know,
No,
we
no,
say
I knew that was too good to be true.
it's too good to be true. Well, here we're talking conception. It can get a little more complicated. As I've seen some of the people on our discussions on on the Facebook group bring up things. You've got to look at your situation with your tax advisor because there are a whole list of different issues that come into play there. But potentially you have that much benefit, and there's a benefit on that with some different phase outs of income and things. So talk to your CPA for your situation because everybody's a little different, but that's a huge benefit. And this is only one property. What if you bought 5 assets? You know, 10 grand. Now we're talking 50,000. That's real money.
Like $50,000 in your pocket.
Right.
And I do want to piggyback on what you just said and make a more formal disclaimer for everyone watching. I am not a CPA. Scott is not a CPA. You absolutely want to talk to your hopefully investor friendly accountant. We are just kind of giving you the information. Everyone's situation is going to be different. So you must talk to a tax professional and don't just take our word for everything. Like you really want to work one-on-one with that person and do whatever is going to be best for your personal situation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great disclaimer. And by the way, you know, one thing to consider is you're sharing about some of these tax strategies. You know, that's where as a real estate investor, you really up your game. You start learning some of these concepts and you bring them back to your CPA.
Exactly.
And then you look at it. So because CPAs typically a lot of times file taxes, you say, here's what I'm looking at. Can we do this? Brainstorm with them and see what's possible. So, you know, that's a really important piece, I think, in the whole discussion there.
So a quick question for you, and this is also something to be discussed with the accountant or the CPA. There is I don't want to say a misconception because I'm asking you the question. Do you have to be a real estate professional to take advantage of cost segregation?
The simple answer is no, you don't. Now, and we won't get into the technicalities of being a real estate professional, but there are some great advantages of being a real estate professional where you can write off passive losses against ordinary income. But the simple answer there, and hopefully I'll kind of talk along while you stabilize there, Allie, but there are some benefits. Anybody who makes up to 100,000 can write off up to 25,000. And then it phases out at 150,000 and you get some partial benefits. So, you know, we won't get into the technical mumbo jumbo and the weeds of it too much, but short answer is you don't have to be a real estate professional to take advantage of cost seg. It certainly is more advantageous as a real estate professional, but not required at all.
So some people may be watching this, they're like, done, sold, I want this. How in the world, what's the next step? Like, where do people go to have a cost segregation study done?
There are a lot of providers out there that provide cost segregation studies for residential homes. And it's really a software driven package where you put in the variables, the price, and you put in some information, and it'll actually spit that out. So, one, you can do a Google search, cost segregation study near me. I use a provider. I'm here in Colorado, and Allie, I use a provider in your neck of the woods in Southern California. They charge, I think, about $400 per study. So it's a fairly modest fee.
Well, especially in comparison if you're getting $10,000 in your pocket.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly. So that's the place you can start. The other one to start would be to call your CPA, and they might have somebody locally. So that's another good resource. Your CPA will probably know a few cost segregation providers. Shop around a little bit. There's some that charge a big premium, and there are other ones, like I said, I'm in that $400 range. You want to be $400, $500, $600, something like that. You don't have to pay thousands of dollars to get all this benefit.
Is there for people looking, because I'm going to be one of these people, although maybe I can grab your referral for who to use, but if people are interviewing or meeting different companies and it's like, is it just straight about what they charge, or is there a quality difference? Like, how can people gauge, like, if they pay too little, are they going to get shafted somehow because it's not as good of a study, or the study's pretty black and white?
The studies, there are a lot of similarities. The company that I use stands behind it in the event of an audit. So to me, that's got a lot of value. And as we all know, the IRS is going to be beefing up enforcement. They're going to be hiring, whether they spend $80 billion on new IRS people. So it's probably a smart and shrewd idea to go with a provider that'll stand behind their study.
That's
In
great.
the event you get audited in the future, I'd rather go with a provider that'll do that versus just paying the fee and I'm out all on my own. So I use a provider that stand behind their study, and I think that's a great way to go.
That's definitely a great way to go. And I wouldn't have thought to even think about who stands behind an audit or not. So if I hire one of these companies or I do it online or however, so do I end up with the results of the study in my hand and I give that to my accountants when I'm filing my taxes? Is that how this all works?
Exactly how it works. I get a
Okay.
3-page report. That 3-page report will summarize it on the top of what's going on, and then it provides detailed information. I hand that over to my CPA. They now can see everything. So it'll show the old depreciation, the new, and it breaks it out into components. So it's fairly simple. A 3-page
Okay.
report's not that complicated, and it's everything the CPA needs on their end to prepare the taxes and give you the benefits of cost segregation.
So if I did that study this year on my properties and they put it into my 2022 taxes, what happens next year? Does that study carry forward, or is it something I do every year? Or how does this come into play? Once it's done once, then what happens?
It's a one-time study. So you'll do it once, and what you get is a new depreciation schedule. Now you've taken a little bit more depreciation in 2022, and then you're going to have on your straight line depreciation, it's going to be a little less on a go forward. So that's a new depreciation schedule that follows you with the property. Now that brings up something that people should consider. Now that you're taking more depreciation, you're going to have, if you sell it, a little bit more capital gain, which, to go full circle on you, Allie, if you have more capital gain, there's a whole other provision in the code called the 1031 exchange that
Hey, I
allows
didn't hear about those. I hear that pretty
pay
cool.
taxes on it. So now you see the interplay, right? You got more gain than you need, even more so. So they're kind of interwoven concepts, and you can use the cost segregation now. Later on, you use the 1031 exchange. And if I were to simplify it, these are benefits put into the code to encourage people to buy real estate, to renovate real estate, to improve property. The government wants us doing this as investors. They want to encourage capital into real estate. So we've got these benefits that, frankly, you don't have this in the tax code for buying Google stock or Amazon or Tesla. But as real estate investors, these incentives are in the code to draw in capital to help make our housing stock build more houses, improve more buildings. So there's a real benefit to society. And you really just follow the tax code. Where are the incentives built in? invest in those ways, and they're very tax advantageous.
I think that's a great mention to tell people because I feel like, and sometimes I feel like this when I'm putting all my write-offs in, like my mileage and my meals and lodging. Sometimes I almost feel like I'm scamming the system in a way or like taking advantage of it. And exactly what you're saying is that these things were put into the tax code to be used by you. So don't think that you're like, finagling the system or scamming the system and like, reaching around here to grab this extra return. Like it's there for your use. So they want you to use it. Use it.
Absolutely. And to piggyback on that, Ali, I'll do a shameless plug. A great book for new investors is the book Tax-Free Wealth by Tom Wheelwright. And it talks, he's Robert Kiyosaki's kind of right-hand man on taxes. And it talks about these concepts of go where the incentives are built into the code. And once you understand that the tax code really just wants to encourage investment in certain areas, and if we as investors, we step into where the IRS wants us to invest anyway, we get all those advantages. And think about what we do. I mean, I know you've got multiple properties. I've got where I invest. There are other co-investors that I know. We've actually taken neighborhoods that were kind of sagging, done turnkeys, and improved whole neighborhoods where the street is now improved. So that's a huge benefit to the community, right? Everybody benefits, families benefit, everybody benefits from that. So yeah, I feel very confident knowing that those incentives are there, but there's a really good societal or social outcome with those incentives. And frankly, as investors, we do get the benefits of those things too. So it helps our return, which is great.
Huge. And a kind of an unrelated plug that I want to throw in there is we're kind of in a place in the real estate market now where cash flow, as we've known it, has gotten really squeezed compared to what we're used to over the last 10 years. Over the last 10 years, property prices were cheap, interest rates were cheap, cash flow was through the roof. And there's really a big shift going on right now where investors are really having to learn, okay, what if the cash flow isn't as high as we used to? Because I think back in the day, a lot of people just used to invest for cash flow because there was so much of it. And what's so amazing about what you're talking about, think about cash flow. Do you actually get $10,000 in cash flow a year from the cash flow? And it's like, wait a minute, obviously these numbers are ballpark. So whether your cost segregation study would put $10,000 in your pocket or not can give or take a little bit, but think about it. So many people right now are so focused on cash flow, and when it's not there in the way that they're used to, they're like, yeah, no, I don't think, I'm not going to go forward or whatever. But think about this. You have that little cash flow. Yeah, it might be a little lower than you're used to. But then if you suddenly end up with $10,000 in your pocket just from the tax benefit side, and that's not including other write-offs and everything else. If you suddenly get $10,000 a year in your pocket for however long it lasts, hi, that's a lot. And I feel like that's something people don't think about because they're like, well, that property gets $100 a month in cash flow. That's not going to do anything for me. Well, what's $10,000 a month, over the year divided by 12, add that to your cash flow. Now, how's your cash flow looking? And so I think this opens up such a cool gate for people to really dive into the actual profit centers of a rental property, because I've talked about them, other people have talked about them, but again, for 10 years or the last decade since cash flow was king, people haven't really had to look into those profit centers. But I know for me personally, now that I've started looking much more into those, and now that I've had a lot of my properties for 10 years, and I'm looking back over 10 years and I'm like, oh, those things profit in a lot more ways than I realized. Like the rent increases over 10 years. Oh my God. Like they're crazy. And now we're really adding another layer into that is like, if you got 4,000 versus 36,000, and now that 36,000 is an extra 10 grand you weren't expecting, that changes things in my mind. So the reason that I say all of that is to really loop this cost segregation thing into the bigger conversation of how real estate is truly so profitable, because it's kind of crazy when you break it all down, I think.
Yeah, great points you made there on really looking at the bigger picture. Real estate, you've got all these levers we can pull, right? So cash flow is attractive and we all want that. But that doesn't mean there aren't other levers too, right? Prices went up, Most people think rent increases are going to be following price increases. Properties go up in value with inflation. Debt, we will get into it, but it gets what's called debased over time, another benefit. The list goes on and on. So the wonderful thing I think about single family rentals, why I like that space, you've got all these different levers that you can pull. Go to the stock market, all I can do is buy Apple at one price and sell over here and get the gain. With real estate, I've got cash flow, I got tax benefits, I got depreciation, I have cost segregation, I have rent increases, I have appreciation, I have debasement of my debt. I have, I think, 7 levers to pull roughly versus one lever over at the stock market. Which one would I rather have? And actually, I'll throw in one more: control. I'm sure you've done this in your time. I've gone in and I've upgraded an older kitchen and painted the cabinets and put in stainless where I had white appliances and bumped my rents up by $200 a month. So you as an investor get to make the call. When do you want to renovate a property? Or do you want to offer a move-in special because things are a little slow? You control your asset. And to me, that's a huge benefit, is being able to control your financial future and your destiny, which I can't do with stocks, bonds, and mutual funds.
Yeah, it's like if your Apple stock goes down, there's nothing you can do about it except sit and wait. But if the returns on my rental property go down, there's a lot of things I can do. What do I need to do to get this back on track or to reverse course? I have that power, and like you said, the control, which I think is huge. So I know for me, I am emailing my accountant very soon because I want to do this on my properties. And I'm hoping, I know for me, it gave me kind of the layman's terms, like, oh, now I know what all those big words mean. And if you have any last final things, I do want to give people, there were a few things, kind of buzzwords that we said along the video that you may not have exactly known what we were talking about. So I'm going to link to a handful of videos down below. Specifically, Scott briefly mentioned turnkeys. If you have no idea what a turnkey rental property is, I'm going to put a video about that. Let's see, I was making notes. He mentioned the Facebook group. So I run a turnkey rental properties Facebook group and a turnkey rental properties for sale Facebook group. All the more reason to know what a turnkey is. So come join those Facebook groups. I'll link to those. And then also the 1031 video that we mentioned that we did, definitely looking at 1031s before you plan to sell anything, because it, like Scott was saying, it loops into this cost segregation depreciation thing. So that way you're not getting yourself stuck with all these capital gains taxes. It's a very legal tax code thing for you to follow. And then one last thing is, we did mention the profit centers. I think we actually went into them a little bit more detail than just the broad explanation of them. But if you want to kind of learn more about those, I'm going to put a video down there, the 5 profit centers of a rental property. So that'll be a great foundation for you to add on top of everything you've heard today. So Scott, do you have any last words for everybody?
Well, one thing would be take advantage, full advantage, and explore all the tax advantages in the code. Be strong in looking into those, see if they make sense for you. And I do want to just kind of circle back to you, Allie, and your groups and your networks. I've watched some of the properties, particularly in the last few weeks. You have really, really great assets for first-time investors. These are not assets that are going to cost $1 million to get into. You've got assets, 90,000, 140, 180, great assets with really strong numbers. So for those of you that are maybe seeing this and haven't been following those, look at those groups. I will tell you, I look at the properties. I saw one, I missed it. I think I was traveling somewhere. I was like, that is a really nice asset. So you're bringing to the market, to investors, an ability for people to get plugged into real estate with really affordable properties in markets that are really kind of stable, linear markets with good growth, solid fundamentals. They're not going to, do that boom bust roller coaster. So anyway, I would just say, check out what you've got in terms of offerings. There's some really good properties there. And thanks so much. It's always fun to connect with you. It's always fun to go back and forth. And really appreciate this opportunity.
Thanks, Earl. Thanks for everything you just said. And every time, like when you chime in and say like a property looks good, I'm like, whoo, because sometimes, some can slide through there. And I'm like, wow, if Scott thinks it's good, that's actually pretty good. You're an investor that I look up to, and I trust your judgment. And so I so appreciate your feedback on that. And I really, if anyone's looking for 1031 help, absolutely go to Scott. He's my go-to. You guys probably don't know this, but maybe I said this in the beginning. I bug him all the time with questions about things involving big words because it's not my stronger suit. So check out all the videos below and really think about doing a cost segregation study. Again, please talk to your accountant or CPA. Don't just take our word for it, but now hopefully you have some working information to go off of. And yeah, we'll hopefully, Scott, we can do another video when the next big word topic comes up. And I'm like, Scott, help, because that's kind of how these usually start.
I like those big words.
Yeah, I don't. I hate them. All right. Thank you, Scott. And everybody, please hit the like button on this. Make sure you're subscribed to my channel. Check out Scott's information. I forgot to even mention, I'll put Scott's direct information down there. If you do need 1031 help, check out the other video I did with him, and we'll see you on the next one.